The arena smelled of dust, sweat, and fear. Neon lights buzzed overhead, casting sharp shadows across the chained combatants waiting for their fate. Among them, one figure stood out, not by size, not by muscle, but by a calm that unnerved even the guards. His hands were bound, his armor tattered, yet his posture radiated quiet confidence. "Number 47, the auctioneer bellowed, his mechanical voice amplified through speakers. "Behold the strongest human in the sector. Trained in combat, undefeated, and ready to thrill you in the arena." The crowd erupted into cheers, some laughing at the thought of a human challenging exotic beasts, others eager to see new blood in the pit. But there was a strange energy about this man. He didn't flinch, didn't look around. His eyes were focused, scanning every corner, calculating every movement. Merrick Solon, a burly trader with scars across his face, leaned forward from his platform. His lips curled into a grin. "Perfect," he muttered. "This one's mine." He slammed his credits onto the auction pad. The gavel came down with a metallic clang, finalizing the sale. The human, or rather, the man everyone thought was just another gladiator, walked toward Merrick's platform with deliberate steps. The crowd whistled and cheered, mistaking his calm demeanor for arrogance. Nobody noticed the faint glimmer beneath the tattered chest armor, a small insignia, almost invisible, marking him as someone far more dangerous than a simple fighter. As Merrick's guards moved to secure him, the man didn't resist. He only allowed himself a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It was a smile that hinted at secrets the galaxy might not yet know. "Get him into the holding chamber," Merrick barked. His tone was confident, almost cocky. After all, he had purchased what he thought was the perfect gladiator, strong, disciplined, and obedient. But obedience, he would soon learn, was a misconception. The holding chambers were a maze of steel corridors, dimly lit and echoing with the muffled sounds of other captives. The man moved silently, his chains clinking softly, but he seemed more aware than any guard realized. Every step, every breath was measured. When he passed the other prisoners, he offered no words, only a nod, small, but oddly reassuring. Merrick's lieutenant, a wiry alien with yellow skin and 3 eyes, leaned close to the trader. "You don't think he's unusual, do you?" Merrick laughed, a low rumble of amusement. "He's just a human. They're nothing without proper training. By the time he reaches the pit, he'll be nothing but a trophy." But deep down, a flicker of unease crossed his mind. There was something different about this one. Not in his muscles, not in his posture, but in the way he carried himself. As if he had already faced impossible odds and survived. Hours later, the arena gates opened for practice. The human was led into the pit, a space filled with fire-lit obstacles, jagged stones, and holographic targets designed to test skill and endurance. The crowd cheered, expecting clumsy swings and predictable moves. Instead, the man moved with precision. Every step was purposeful, every swing calculated. He dodged an energy whip with a graceful roll, disarmed a mechanical opponent with a single fluid motion, and landed on his feet without a sound. The crowd gasped. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Who is he?" Merrick watched, a bead of sweat forming at his temple. His prized purchase, the human he thought he controlled, was showing abilities beyond mere training. The arena was designed for spectacle, but the man treated it like a battlefield. Every move suggested knowledge of tactics, strategy, leadership. Back in the chambers, the human removed his helmet, letting his brown hair fall loosely. His eyes, sharp and focused, scanned the arena from every angle. A flicker of a smile crossed his face, a smile that spoke of memories, of commands given and fleets led across the stars. He was no ordinary gladiator. He was Admiral Jace Theron, decorated, respected, and thought lost in a planetary skirmish years ago. For now, the secret remained hidden. The crowd saw only a human gladiator, bought for the highest price. They didn't know that the man they cheered for had once commanded entire fleets, won impossible battles, and shaped the destinies of thousands. As the lights dimmed and the crowd roared, Merrick Solon's confidence remained, just barely. He had bought a gladiator, But he had no idea that he had just purchased a storm in human form. And when that storm finally broke, it would not be the arena that trembled, but the very people who thought they controlled him. The first 50 seconds of the spectacle were over, and the whispers had begun. The man simply watched, calm, patient, and ready. The game had changed. The arena gates hissed open, and the pit yawned before him like a maw ready to swallow him whole. Jagged stones jutted from the ground, glowing with molten veins, and holographic fire traps flickered in unpredictable patterns. The crowd's roar intensified, expecting chaos. They had bought a gladiator, but what they got was something else entirely. Merrick Solon, standing on the observation platform, clutched the railing. "Remember, just fight," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. He was confident. The human was strong, yes, but he was a gladiator, nothing more. The first opponent emerged, a hulking alien brute, over 9 feet tall, with claws like curved daggers and skin like obsidian armor. Its breath hissed in short, dangerous bursts, and its eyes gleamed with predatory intelligence. The audience gasped, some throwing bets onto the creature, sure that the human would fall. Jace Theron, though no one knew his real name yet, stood still. He measured distance, reading the brute's movements with military precision. He didn't swing wildly or charge blindly. Every step he took was calculated, every glance predicting the alien's next move. The brute lunged. Its claws slashed through the air, aiming for Jace's head. In a single, fluid motion, Jace ducked, rolled, and twisted, letting the claws pass harmlessly above him. He countered with a precise strike to the alien's knee joint, crippling its balance. The crowd gasped. This was more than strength. This was skill, training beyond the normal gladiatorial level. With a series of rapid, tactical maneuvers, Jace disarmed the creature, using its momentum against it. A final, measured strike sent the brute sprawling into the stone pit, stunned but alive. The audience erupted, unsure whether to cheer or flee in awe. Merrick's smirk faltered. "Impressive, but it's just one fight," he muttered. His confidence was a thin veneer now, cracking under the weight of the unexpected. The human gladiator didn't celebrate. He remained calm, scanning the pit for the next threat. That's when the guards tried to restrain him, an impulsive move born of overconfidence. Jace didn't resist violently, but his actions were swift, precise, and terrifying. He twisted, turned, and neutralized them with minimal force, leaving them conscious but immobilized. The crowd screamed, thinking it part of the spectacle. Merrick's face drained of color. This was no ordinary fighter. This was someone trained to command, to dominate in situations where lives, and not just credits, were at stake. "You move like a commander," whispered one spectator to another. The term, commander, spread through the crowd like wildfire, though none yet understood how true it was. Jace didn't speak. Words were unnecessary. His actions conveyed every measure of his history, of battles fought and won, of fleets maneuvered across star systems, of lives guided and lost. All of it distilled into motion, into every dodge, strike, and measured step he took in the pit. As the fight drew to an end, the holographic fire traps activated in a random pattern, forcing all fighters to react quickly. Most gladiators would have panicked. Jace analyzed the environment, predicted the sequences, and moved with an almost mechanical precision. He avoided every trap, turned the hazards against his opponents, and emerged unscathed while the other contestants fell one by one. By the time the final gong sounded, the crowd was on its feet, stunned into silence, then erupting into chaotic applause. Bets had been lost, expectations shattered. A human had dominated the pit in a way no one thought possible. Back in the holding area, Merrick's lieutenant approached, eyes wide. "We may have underestimated him," he said cautiously. Merrick's jaw tightened. "Underestimated? He's a human. He's supposed to be expendable." But doubt had crept in, and he couldn't shake it. The man he had purchased wasn't just a fighter, he was something else entirely. Jace sat in the corner, quietly tending to minor scrapes and bloodied knuckles. His calm, deliberate care revealed discipline honed over decades. One of the other prisoners tried to speak, asking for reassurance. Jace only gave a subtle nod. No words. Leadership was conveyed in presence, in the way he moved, in the decisions he made, even in silence. As night fell, the arena emptied, leaving the echoes of chaos behind. The guards whispered about the human gladiator who moved like a storm, who fought like a tactician, who seemed untouchable. But Jace's mind was elsewhere. He wasn't thinking about surviving another fight. He was planning, calculating. Every detail of the arena, every guard shift, every weakness in the compound was noted. The seeds of rebellion were being sown quietly, like a shadow moving beneath the light. Merrick Solon stared at the empty pit from the observation platform. "He's just a fighter," he muttered, trying to convince himself. But deep down he knew the truth. Something in that human wasn't just strength, it was experience, command, and strategy. And those were things no arena could contain. For now, the secret remained hidden from the crowd, from Merrick, and from the other prisoners. But the whispers were spreading. And when Jace finally chose to act, it would not be the pit that trembled, it would be the compound itself. The human gladiator, calm and patient, allowed the night to settle around him. He had survived worse. And when dawn came, the arena would no longer hold him. The holding chambers were silent except for the hum of the ventilation system and the occasional clink of chains. Jace Theron moved with the same calm precision he had shown in the arena, removing the remnants of his training dummies and securing the area. His eyes flicked to the other prisoners, noting their fatigue and fear, and for the first time he allowed himself a small nod of reassurance. Merrick Solon entered, flanked by his three-eyed lieutenant. He had come to check on his investment, confident that the human gladiator would remain a tool under his control. But what he found was unsettling. Jace sat cross-legged, chains removed, inspecting the markings on his armor as though they were maps or tactical plans. His calm, deliberate movements were not those of a fighter anticipating chaos. They were the motions of a commander reviewing intelligence. Merrick cleared his throat. "You performed well in the pit today," he said, trying to mask his unease with forced authority. "But remember, you fight for me now. Understand?" Jace looked up slowly, his brown eyes cold yet measured. He did not reply immediately, weighing his words carefully. "I understand," he said at last, his voice calm, resonant, carrying a quiet authority that made the lieutenant instinctively step back. The lieutenant, curious and increasingly uneasy, leaned closer to Merrick. "Sir, look at the insignia under his armor. The pattern. I've seen it before, in the fleet archives. He's a Grand Armada officer." Merrick's laugh was hollow. "An officer? The human? Nonsense. He's a gladiator now. The pit has a way of humbling even the proudest warriors." But as Jace slowly removed the chest armor, the hidden insignia glinted under the dim light, a symbol recognized only by seasoned officers of the Interstellar Navy. It marked him as Admiral Jace Theron, decorated, honored, and believed dead years ago after a planetary skirmish in the outer colonies. The lieutenant's jaw dropped. By the stars, he commanded fleets. Entire fleets. He's a hero. Merrick's face paled. This was a mistake, an unimaginable one. Owning a gladiator was one thing. Owning a human who had the experience, the strategic mind, and the leadership to command thousands was something else entirely. Jace leaned forward slightly, letting the realization settle over the room. "I was brought here as a fighter," he said quietly, "but I am not defined by this pit." His words carried weight, commanding attention even without raised voices. The chain does not make the soldier, and the cage does not make the man. The prisoners, who had been silently observing, shifted uneasily. Whispers spread like fire. "He is an admiral. He was a hero. He survived impossible odds." Merrick's hands clenched at his sides. He had bought strength, he had bought obedience, but he had not bought submission. Not from someone who had led fleets into battle, not from someone who had survived betrayals, attacks, and wars far beyond the scope of this arena. Jace rose, his movements precise and controlled, his presence commanding. He did not shout, did not make threats. Yet the aura of authority in the room was palpable. Guards who had been cocky and indifferent now hesitated, unsure how to approach him. The human they thought was a mere gladiator was something entirely different. A force shaped by years of experience, battle, and survival. Merrick forced himself to speak, trying to regain control. "You may have commanded ships," he said, his voice tight, "but here, you fight for me. You obey me. That is your reality." Jace tilted his head slightly, a faint smile appearing for the first time. "Reality is not defined by who owns you," he said. "It is defined by what you are capable of achieving." The lieutenant swallowed hard. "Sir, if we let him think, even for a moment, that he could resist, it could be disastrous." Merrick nodded, finally acknowledging the truth he had tried to ignore. This human, this gladiator, no, this admiral, was not merely a fighter. He was a strategist, a leader, a man whose mind and skill could turn an arena into a battlefield and a compound into a war zone. Jace stepped toward the barred exit, chains clinking softly as he moved. Every motion was calculated, every step deliberate. The prisoners followed instinctively, sensing leadership. The atmosphere had shifted, fear mixed with hope, respect mixed with awe. As he passed the guards, none attempted to strike or restrain him. They had already understood, perhaps instinctively, that this was no ordinary human. This was someone who had survived the impossible, who had commanded lives and ships, and who would not be broken by walls or chains. Merrick watched from the corner of the chamber, tension coiling in his chest like a living thing. He had purchased a gladiator to entertain crowds, to make credits. Instead, he had acquired an admiral, a man whose mind was a weapon far deadlier than any blade. And the storm, the uprising that none yet dared imagine, was already beginning in the calm, calculating gaze of Jace Theron. Night had settled over the compound, but the shadows seemed alive with whispers and movement. Jace Theron walked through the dimly lit corridors, silent and deliberate. Every footstep was measured, every glance calculating. He wasn't just moving through the halls, he was mapping them, memorizing guard rotations, noting weak points, and mentally plotting the sequence of events to come. The other prisoners watched him, hesitant at first, then drawn to his calm authority. Whispers passed among them. "He knows what he's doing, follow him." A spark of hope ignited in their hearts, replacing the despair that had settled during endless days in chains. Jace paused at the junction outside the guard barracks. His eyes swept over the area, assessing the patrol routes. With a nod, he signaled to the nearest prisoner, a wiry man named Kellen, who nodded back with wide eyes. The message was clear: move quietly, follow the plan. In the shadows, Jace struck. One guard was disarmed before he even knew what happened, incapacitated silently. Another reached for his weapon, but Jace's movements were a blur of precision, joint locks, quick strikes, neutralizing threats without causing permanent harm. Every action was deliberate, controlled, designed to minimize attention while maximizing effect. The prisoners were stunned. The man they had thought was just another fighter was not only powerful but a tactician. He led them with confidence, and soon, small groups of captives began to follow his lead, quietly freeing themselves from chains and preparing to act. Merrick Solon, observing from the control tower, felt unease prick at him. What is he doing?" he muttered, voice tight with tension. The screens showed glimpses of the halls, guards incapacitated in rapid succession, prisoners moving with a new sense of purpose. Something was happening, something beyond mere survival. Jace had a plan. By the time the first alarm sounded, the prisoners were already in position, spread strategically throughout the compound. He used the guards' own routines against them, funneling them into choke points and neutralizing them before reinforcements could arrive. Every move had purpose. Every action was a step toward total control. The arena, once a symbol of fear, had become a battlefield under his command. Holographic turrets and fire traps were turned against their operators, traps were bypassed or used to corral enemies, and every corridor became a controlled zone under his direction. The prisoners, inspired by his leadership, followed without hesitation. Merrick's lieutenant, pale and trembling, turned to his commander. "He's leading them. He's not just fighting, he's orchestrating the entire rebellion." Merrick gritted his teeth. "This isn't possible. He's a human. He's a gladiator. He can't. The words faltered as he watched his investment move like a general, commanding forces in a fluid, strategic manner. The rebellion escalated quickly. Guards were disarmed, prisoners freed, and the compound descended into chaos. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and the scent of smoke began to drift through the halls. Jace remained calm, his focus unshaken, every step purposeful. By the time Merrick tried to intervene directly, it was too late. Jace had taken control of the main access points. Holographic barriers blocked reinforcements, and the prisoners, emboldened, followed his commands flawlessly. What had begun as a small, tactical uprising was now a full-scale revolt. Merrick's confidence, which had carried him through countless trades and battles, crumbled. He realized the bitter truth. Power was not measured by purchase, by chains, or by intimidation. It was earned through skill, strategy, and leadership, the very qualities Jace possessed in abundance. The storm he had underestimated now raged around him. Merrick could see it in the eyes of his guards, in the movements of the prisoners, and most of all, in the calm, calculated gaze of the man he had bought as a gladiator. Jace Theron, the Admiral thought lost to history, had turned his cage into a battlefield, and he was winning. By dawn, the compound had fallen under Jace's control. Exhausted but disciplined, he stood atop a central platform, surveying the liberated prisoners. Their expressions were a mix of awe, relief, and determination. For them, hope had been restored. For Merrick, humiliation and fear replaced arrogance. Jace's voice, calm but commanding, carried across the compound. "You were brought here to be controlled," he said, looking over the prisoners, "but none of us are defined by chains. Today we take back our freedom." The words resonated. The arena, the compound, the cages, they no longer held power. The real force had emerged: leadership, strategy, and the unbreakable will of a man who had survived impossible odds. Merrick Solon, realizing the scale of his mistake, fled the platform. His traders and guards followed, scattered and defeated. The rebellion was complete, but more than that, it had set the stage for what Jace would do next. The human gladiator, now revealed as an admiral, had begun to reshape the fate of everyone within his reach. And the galaxy, far beyond the compound, would soon hear of it. Dawn's first light broke over the compound, casting long shadows across the broken corridors and shattered gates. The air was thick with smoke, the scent of scorched metal and fear lingering from the night's chaos. The rebellion, orchestrated with precision and patience, had left Merrick's guards scattered and demoralized, and the prisoners now moved freely, their chains gone, their spirits renewed. Jace Theron stood atop the central platform in the arena, surveying the scene. His posture was calm, measured, almost regal, yet every eye in the compound instinctively turned toward him. For weeks he had been a gladiator to them, an enigma, a source of awe. Now he was something more: a commander, a leader, a force impossible to ignore. He glanced down at Merrick Solon, who had finally emerged from the control tower, flanked by the few remaining loyal guards. The trader's confidence had crumbled. He was no longer the master of this place. Fear and disbelief flickered across his face as he realized the human he had bought was not only free but untouchable. "You brought me here as a fighter," Jace said, his voice calm, resonant, carrying across the courtyard. "You thought chains could define me. You thought fear could control me. But I am not defined by cages. I am defined by what I do when given the choice." Merrick took a step forward, trying to regain authority. "You're just a human. I own this arena. I bought you. You will obey me." Jace's gaze sharpened. "You do not own me. You never did. And you will not control what is beyond your understanding." With that, the remaining guards attempted a final stand, weapons drawn. It was over before it began. Jace moved with lethal precision, not indiscriminately, but strategically, incapacitating each guard in seconds. His motions were fluid, commanding, unstoppable. One by one, they fell to the ground, unharmed but immobilized, caught in the orchestrated flow of a man who had once led entire fleets across the stars. The prisoners, inspired and emboldened, watched silently. There was no chaos among them, only a sense of unity, a recognition that the man on the platform was more than a warrior. He was a leader who had earned their trust with each deliberate choice, each act of calculated restraint. Merrick, defeated, sank to his knees, staring up at Jace with a mix of fear and awe. What are you?" he asked, voice trembling. Jace's expression softened slightly, almost imperceptibly. "I am someone who refuses to be broken," he said simply. "I am someone who knows what freedom is worth. And I am someone who will ensure that no one here is ever caged again." He stepped down from the platform and moved among the prisoners, signaling them to leave the compound in an orderly fashion. His presence alone maintained discipline. There was no chaos, only organized freedom. The arena, once a symbol of fear and spectacle, had been transformed into a stage of liberation. Holographic barriers flickered and died, fire traps deactivated, and the compound systems, once controlled by Merrick, now lay silent under Jace's careful management. Kellen, the wiry prisoner who had first followed Jace in the shadows, approached him. "What now?" he asked quietly, awe in his voice. Jace looked out over the gates, at the horizon where the first light of day painted the sky. "Now," he said, "we reclaim what was taken from us. We rebuild, we protect, and we remember who we are. Chains do not make the soldier. Cages do not make the man. Leadership, courage, and choice, those define us." Merrick, finally realizing the extent of his failure, crawled backward, trying to escape the compound. But Jace's focus remained elsewhere. The threat of revenge was irrelevant. What mattered was freedom, for the prisoners, for the oppressed, and for himself. The compound was silent now, save for the soft murmurs of liberated prisoners. Jace stood atop the platform once more, not as a gladiator, not as a captive, but as an admiral, a tactician, and a leader. The first battle had been won, but more importantly, a statement had been made: no chains could ever contain him. As the liberated prisoners filed through the gates, heading toward a new dawn and a new life, Jace paused and looked back one last time. The arena, the compound, Merrick, all remnants of control, were behind him. Ahead lay freedom, strategy, and the promise of what he could accomplish with skill, patience, and courage. The galaxy might have thought him lost, thought him broken, but Jace Theron had returned, not as a gladiator, not as a legend, but as a force that could not be ignored. And anyone who tried to cage him again would discover the full weight of his command, the precision of his strategy, and the unyielding strength of a man who refused to be defeated. The sun rose fully, casting light on the liberated faces and the ruins of the compound. For Jace Theron, the arena was no longer a cage. It was a battlefield conquered, a challenge overcome, and a symbol of what true leadership could achieve. And so, the human gladiator who had been bought and underestimated became an admiral victorious, a hero not of spectacle, but of strategy, courage, and freedom.